I walked through my own front door at 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, expecting to find Sandra curled up on the couch with her laptop, complaining about quarterly reports. Instead, I found her pressed against the kitchen counter with Arnold Myers, her brother-in-law, his hands tangled in her hair, her legs wrapped around his waist. They didn't hear me come in. The television was on, some reality show providing convenient background noise for their little performance. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, watching my wife of 3 years make out with her sister's husband like they were teenagers at prom. I cleared my throat. They jumped apart so fast Arnold nearly fell backward into the refrigerator. Sandra's face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on defiant irritation. "Alex," she said, smoothing down her blouse, "you're home early." Traffic was light. I walked to the cabinet, pulled out a glass, and poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey. "Don't mind me, just grabbing a drink. Hope the show's good." Arnold straightened his tie, trying to look dignified despite the lipstick smeared across his collar. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like?" I took a sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. "Because it looks like my wife was about to consummate her affair on our kitchen counter, which, honestly, is pretty unsanitary. We eat there." Sandra laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, please. Like you're going to do anything about it. You don't have the spine, Alex. You never have." I nodded thoughtfully. "You're probably right." "I know I'm right. You'll sulk for a few days, maybe sleep on the couch, but you won't leave. You can't afford to leave. Your little engineering job barely covers half the mortgage." Arnold was edging toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with Sandra's brutal honesty. Smart man, well, relatively speaking. "I should go," he mumbled. "Serena's expecting me." "Give my regards to your wife," I said pleasantly. "Tell her I said hello." After he left, Sandra and I stood in our kitchen, staring at each other across a chasm that had apparently been there for months, maybe years. "So," I said, "how long? Does it matter?" "Humor me," she shrugged. 6 months, maybe 7. I finished my whiskey and set the glass in the sink. "Well, this has been illuminating. I'm going to go work in the garage for a while." "That's it? That's your big reaction? What did you expect? Tears? Shouting? A dramatic confrontation?" "I expected you to act like a man for once." I paused at the kitchen doorway. "Careful what you wish for, Sandra." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Down in my basement workshop, I sat at my workbench and stared at the pegboard full of tools. My hands were steady, my mind was clear. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Elliot Howe. We'd been friends since college, back when he was studying journalism and I was grinding through mechanical engineering coursework. Now he ran a small private investigation business specializing in insurance fraud and cheating spouses. "Need a favor," I texted. "Bring your camera and your dirt digging skills." His response came back within minutes. "When and where?" "Tomorrow. Coffee shop on Elm Street. 9 a.m. "This about Sandra?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "This is about everything." Upstairs, I could hear Sandra moving around, probably cleaning up evidence of her romantic evening. The shower started running. She was washing off Arnold's cologne, getting ready to slip into bed next to me like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something had shifted inside me when she laughed, when she told me I didn't have the spine to do anything about her betrayal. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a lot of things. I opened my laptop and started changing passwords. Bank accounts first, then email, then social media. Small steps, quiet preparation. Sandra thought she knew me, thought she could predict my reactions, but the man she married, the passive, accommodating guy who let her walk all over him, that man had just watched his wife embrace another man in their kitchen. That man was gone. Elliot looked exactly like what he was, a former newspaper reporter turned private investigator. Rumpled clothes, permanent 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes that noticed everything. He slid into the booth across from me, already holding a cup of coffee that looked strong enough to wake the departed. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Slept on the couch." Sandra and I had a disagreement. "About Arnold Myers?" I raised an eyebrow. "You know about that?" "I know about a lot of things. It's my job. Also, Arnold's not exactly subtle. He's been bragging about his side piece at Murphy's Bar for weeks. Half the city knows." The humiliation hit me like a physical blow. Not only was my wife cheating, but her lover was advertising it to anyone who'd listen. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have gotten angry at me for making things up about your perfect wife? He was right. 3 months ago, I would have defended Sandra, would have accused Elliot of jealousy or troublemaking. Amazing how quickly perspective could shift. So what do you need? Elliot asked. Evidence, documentation, everything you can find. For a divorce lawyer? Maybe. Or maybe I just want to know what I'm dealing with. Elliot studied my face. This isn't about division of assets, is it? Sandra thinks she knows me, thinks she can predict exactly how I'll react to anything. She's been playing me for years, and I've been letting her do it. And now? Now I want to play back. We spent the next hour going over logistics. Elliot would tail Sandra and Arnold, document their meetings, find out who else knew about the affair. He'd also dig into Sandra's finances, her social media activity, her professional relationships. This is going to cost you, he warned. I've got savings she doesn't know about. My grandfather left me some money when he passed. Sandra thinks it all went to paying off my student loans. Smart. What else don't you want her to know? That I've been documenting her behavior for months. The way she talks to me, the things she says about my family, my job, my friends. I've got recordings. Elliot grinned. You sneaky bastard. When did you start doing that? Around the time she told her mother I was adequate but uninspiring during their weekly phone gossip session, I was standing right outside the kitchen. Harsh. It gets worse. She's been sharing details about our marriage with her entire social circle. My salary, my family background, my personal habits, making jokes about my blue-collar roots and my limited potential. You've got proof of this? I pulled out my phone and played a recording from 2 weeks ago. Sandra's voice came through clearly. He's like a golden retriever, Mom. Loyal and harmless, but not particularly bright. Arnold says I could do so much better. Elliot whistled low. She really said that? That's one of the milder examples. All right, I'm in. When do we start? Tonight. Arnold will be at Murphy's bar around 9. He goes there every Tuesday after his business meetings with Sandra. How do you know that? Because I've been paying attention, finally. That evening, while Sandra worked late at her office, or claimed to, I drove to Murphy's bar and parked across the street. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and regulars who'd been nursing the same beer since the Carter administration. Arnold was holding court at the bar, regaling a small audience with what I assumed were exaggerated stories of his romantic conquests. He was loud, drunk, and completely oblivious to the fact that his audience looked more annoyed than impressed. I waited until he stumbled out to his car, a pristine BMW that he washed and waxed every weekend like it was a religious ritual. Then I got to work. I didn't slash his tires. That would have been crude, obvious. Instead, I let the air out slowly, just enough to make them look slightly flat. I removed the valve caps and dropped them down a storm drain. Then I opened his hood and disconnected his battery cables, not enough to prevent the car from starting, but enough to make it run rough. The piece de resistance was a custom bumper sticker I'd had made that afternoon. I cheat on my wife. I placed it carefully on his rear bumper, right next to his world's greatest dad decal. By the time Arnold discovered the problems, I was long gone. But Elliot was there with his camera, documenting Arnold's increasingly frantic attempts to figure out what had gone wrong with his precious car. The photos were beautiful. Arnold on his knees in the parking lot, trying to figure out why his tires looked flat. Arnold under the hood, poking at wires with the confidence of someone who'd never changed his own oil. And my personal favorite, Arnold standing behind his car, staring at the bumper sticker with an expression of pure horror. Think he'll figure out it was you? Elliot asked when he showed me the pictures the next morning. Arnold barely knows how to check his own tire pressure. He'll assume it was random vandalism. What about Sandra? Sandra thinks I'm too passive to retaliate. She'll never suspect me. But Sandra's mother was a different story. Isabella Romero had been suspicious of me since the day I married her daughter. She thought Sandra had married beneath her station, and she wasn't shy about expressing that opinion. Her call came that afternoon while I was at work. Alex, we need to talk. Hello, Isabella. How are you? Don't play games with me. I know what you did to Arnold's car. I'm not sure what you mean. He told Sandra what happened. Someone vandalized his BMW last night. Tires, battery, some disgusting sticker. This is exactly the kind of petty, juvenile behavior I'd expect from someone with your background. I put the call on speaker and started recording. My background? You know what I mean. You've never fit in with this family. You don't understand how people like us handle disagreements. People like you? Civilized people, educated people, people who don't resort to property damage when they're upset. I see. And what would civilized, educated people do in my situation? They would handle their marital problems privately, like adults. They wouldn't embarrass the entire family with public displays of immaturity. Interesting perspective. I'll keep that in mind. You'd better, because if you ever embarrass this family again, I'll make sure you regret it. I have connections, Alex. I can make your life very difficult. Is that a threat, Isabella? It's a promise. After she hung up, I saved the recording and sent a copy to Elliot. Isabella had just made a serious mistake. She'd threatened me, on record, based on nothing more than suspicion, and she'd revealed that Arnold had already run crying to Sandra about his car troubles, which meant Sandra knew someone was targeting Arnold. She just didn't know who. Yet. The Morrison Industries annual gala was the social event of the season in our little city. Everyone who mattered would be there, business leaders, politicians, socialites, and their carefully chosen companions. Sandra had been looking forward to it for months, planning her outfit, her networking strategy, her grand entrance. She just hadn't planned on me making an entrance of my own. Madison Reeve was the CEO's daughter, a sharp-tongued marketing executive with her father's business instincts and her mother's social savvy. I'd met her during a project consultation 6 months ago, and we'd discovered a mutual appreciation for sarcasm and strategic thinking. When I called to ask if she needed a date for the gala, she was intrigued. "Isn't your wife going to be there?" "That's the point." "Interesting. What's in it for me?" "Entertainment, and possibly the chance to watch Sandra Romero Foster's head explode in real time." Madison laughed. "Now you have my attention. What did she do?" "Let's just say she's been making some questionable personal choices, and I think it's time for some public accountability." "I like accountability. Pick me up at 7. I spent the afternoon getting ready. New suit, expensive watch, fresh haircut. The watch was particularly important. Sandra had mocked it when I'd bought it, calling it a pathetic attempt to look successful. Tonight she'd get to see how it looked on my wrist while I escorted the CEO's daughter around the ballroom. Madison looked stunning in a way that suggested effortless elegance rather than desperate attention-seeking. We made an impressive couple, and I could see people noticing as we walked into the hotel ballroom. Sandra and Arnold were near the bar, holding court with Isabella and a small circle of Sandra's work friends. Sandra was wearing the red dress she'd bought specifically for this event, the one that had cost more than my monthly car payment. She saw us before we saw her. I watched her face go through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally something approaching panic. Arnold, following her gaze, choked on his martini. "Oh, this is going to be fun," Madison murmured. We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various business contacts. I introduced Madison as my date, nothing more, but the implication was clear. Alex Foster, the adequate but uninspiring engineer, had somehow managed to attract the attention of Madison Reeve. When we finally reached the dance floor, Sandra intercepted us. "Alex, what a surprise." "Sandra, you look lovely. Have you met Madison Reeve?" "We've met," Madison said smoothly, "at the Chamber of Commerce mixer last month. You were telling everyone about your husband's limited social skills, if I remember correctly." Sandra's smile became strained. "I don't recall that conversation." "Really? Because I found it fascinating, especially the part where you said he'd never amount to anything without your guidance." I watched Sandra's face flush. "I think you may have misunderstood." "Oh, I understood perfectly. In fact, I made a note to meet this supposedly hopeless husband of yours. Imagine my surprise when he turned out to be brilliant, charming, and available for this evening's festivities." "Available?" Madison looked at Sandra with mock concern. "Oh dear. Did I say something wrong? I assumed since you were here with Arnold Myers and Alex was unescorted that you had some sort of arrangement." The word arrangement hung in the air like a challenge. Sandra glanced around nervously, suddenly aware that several people were listening to our conversation. I'm here with my husband," she said firmly. "Are you? Because Arnold's been telling people at Murphy's bar that you two have been having quite the romance. Very detailed stories, from what I hear." Sandra went pale. Arnold, who had been trying to blend into the background, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Sandra said. "I'm sure there has been," Madison agreed. "The question is, who's been misunderstanding what?" Before Sandra could respond, Madison took my arm and guided me toward the dance floor. "Shall we?" As we danced, I could see Sandra and Arnold having an intense, whispered conversation near the bar. Isabella had joined them, and all three looked increasingly agitated. "You know," Madison said, "I wasn't entirely sure what your game was when you called me, but watching Sandra's reaction just now, I'm starting to understand. She's been playing me for years. making me feel small, insignificant, forgettable. Tonight, I wanted her to see that maybe she'd misjudged the situation. Mission accomplished. She looks like she's about to have a nervous breakdown. The evening's still young. After our dance, Madison and I mingled with the other guests. She introduced me to her father, several board members, and a handful of potential clients. By the end of the evening, I'd made more valuable business connections than Sandra had managed in 6 months of networking events, but the real victory came during the silent auction. Sandra had been bidding aggressively on a weekend getaway package, the same package she'd mentioned wanting to bid on during one of her recorded phone conversations with her mother. She'd planned to win it and take Arnold for a romantic weekend. I outbid her. Not by a little, by a lot. Enough to make it clear that I had resources she didn't know about. When the auctioneer announced my winning bid, Sandra stared at me across the ballroom with something approaching shock. Where had I gotten that kind of money? How had I managed to outspend her so casually? The answer, of course, was careful financial planning. While Sandra had been spending our joint income on designer clothes and expensive dinners, I'd been quietly building a separate nest egg. My grandfather's inheritance, freelance engineering projects, investments she didn't know about. I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she realized. As the evening wound down, Madison and I prepared to leave. Sandra approached us one final time, her composure finally cracking. "We need to talk," she said to me. "Do we? Because I'm having a wonderful time right here." "This is ridiculous, Alex. You're embarrassing yourself." Madison laughed. "He's embarrassing himself? That's rich, coming from someone whose affair is the subject of barroom gossip." "Stay out of this," Sandra snapped. "Actually," Madison said pleasantly, "I think I'm very much in this. After all, Alex is my date tonight, and from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one who's embarrassing herself." Sandra looked around the ballroom, suddenly aware that several people were watching our little drama unfold. Her carefully constructed social image was cracking, and she knew it. "This isn't over," she said to me. "No," I agreed, "it's not." As Madison and I walked toward the exit, I could see Sandra frantically texting someone, probably her mother, or maybe Arnold, trying to figure out how to contain the damage, how to spin the evening's events in her favor, but the damage was already done. By tomorrow, half the city would know that Sandra Foster's marriage was in trouble, that her husband had publicly moved on, and that her affair with Arnold Myers was common knowledge. The underdog had just scored his first major victory. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. By Thursday morning, Sandra's office was buzzing with gossip. Elliot, who had contacts throughout the city's professional network, kept me updated on the rumors spreading through Sandra's workplace. "She's claiming you're having a midlife crisis," he reported over coffee. "Says you've been acting erratically for weeks, making wild accusations, imagining things that aren't there. Creative. Gets better. She's telling people you've become controlling and possessive. Says she's afraid to be alone with you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She's setting up an abuse narrative. That's what it looks like. Arnold's been backing up her story, telling anyone who'll listen that you've been threatening him, vandalizing his property, harassing Sandra at work. Do they have any evidence? That's the beautiful part. They can't prove any of it without admitting to the affair, and Arnold's too much of a coward to file an official complaint. But Sandra was smarter than Arnold. While he was content to spread rumors at Murphy's bar, she was building a more sophisticated campaign. She'd started documenting our interactions, recording conversations, saving text messages. She was creating evidence to support her victim narrative. The problem was, I'd been creating evidence too. That evening, Sandra came home from work with a new attitude. Gone was the defiant woman who'd laughed at me in our kitchen. In her place was someone nervous, calculating, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her expectations. "We need to talk," she said. "I'm listening." "This has gone too far, Alex. The gala, the rumors, whatever game you think you're playing, it needs to stop." "What game?" "Don't play dumb. You embarrassed me in front of the entire business community. You made me look like a fool." "I took a date to a social event. How is that embarrassing you?" "Madison Reeve? Really? You couldn't have chosen someone more obvious if you tried." "Obvious how?" Sandra sat down across from me, adopting what I recognized as her reasonable discussion posture. "Look, I know you're upset about Arnold. I understand why you'd want to get back at me, but this isn't the way to handle it." "What would be the right way?" "We could go to counseling, work through our problems like adults, figure out how to save our marriage." "Do you want to save our marriage?" She hesitated just long enough to reveal the truth. "Of course I do. We just need to establish some ground rules going forward." "Such as?" "You need to stop this vindictive behavior. No more public humiliation, no more games, no more trying to turn people against me. And in return, I'll end things with Arnold. We'll start fresh. I nodded thoughtfully. That's an interesting offer, but I think you're missing something important. What? I don't want to save our marriage, Sandra. I want to end it. Her carefully maintained composure cracked. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The question is whether we end it quietly with a simple divorce or whether we make it messy. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. We can divide our assets, go our separate ways, and try to maintain some dignity in the process. Or we can fight, and I can start sharing some of the recordings I've made over the past few months. What recordings? I pulled out my phone and played back her conversation with her mother from 2 weeks ago. The one where she called me a golden retriever and discussed my limited potential. Sandra's face went white. You've been recording me? Only when you've been talking about me, which it turns out is quite often. You've provided some fascinating insights into your true feelings about our marriage. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. One-party consent state. As long as I'm part of the conversation or it's happening in my own home, I can record whatever I want. Sandra stood up, pacing now. You can't use those recordings. They were private conversations. Were they? Because you've been sharing the same opinions with your friends, your coworkers, your family. Hell, you told Madison Reeve that I'd never amount to anything. That doesn't sound very private to me. This is insane, Alex. You're acting like a completely different person. No, I'm acting like myself for the first time in years. The person you married was a doormat. Someone who'd let you walk all over him, cheat on him, humiliate him, and then come back begging for more. That person is gone. So what do you want? I want you out of my house. I want a divorce, and I want you to stop spreading lies about me being abusive or controlling. And if I don't agree, then things get messy. And trust me, Sandra, you don't want things to get messy. She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my expression, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't bluffing. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until Sunday. After that, I start making phone calls. What kind of phone calls? The kind where I share those recordings with your boss, your mother, your sister, and anyone else who might be interested in hearing your true opinions about the people in your life. Sandra left that night, claiming she was going to stay with her sister, but Elliot's surveillance showed her checking into a hotel with Arnold. They were planning something. I could feel it. The next morning, I got a call from Sandra's lawyer. Mr. Foster, this is David Chen from Chen & Associates. I represent your wife in a domestic relations matter. That was fast. I'm calling to inform you that my client will be filing for divorce on grounds of mental cruelty and emotional abuse. She's also seeking a restraining order based on your recent pattern of threatening and harassing behavior. Interesting. What evidence does she have of this alleged abuse? Recordings of your threats, documentation of property damage you've caused, witness statements regarding your erratic behavior. I see. And when exactly did these threats occur? According to my client, you've been escalating your abusive behavior over the past several weeks. She's been documenting everything. Smart woman. Tell me, counselor, did she mention her 6-month affair with Arnold Myers, or her plans to take marital assets for romantic getaways with her lover? Silence on the other end of the line. I thought not, I continued. Here's what's going to happen. Your client is going to withdraw her divorce filing and her request for a restraining order. In return, I won't share the rather extensive evidence I have of her adultery and her systematic emotional abuse of me. Mr. Foster, I don't think you understand the seriousness of... I understand perfectly. Your client is trying to flip the script, make herself the victim of abuse rather than the perpetrator of adultery. It's a smart strategy, but it won't work. Because unlike her, I actually have evidence. I hung up and immediately called Elliot. They're making their move, I told him. Restraining order? Among other things. How's our documentation coming along? Better than you could have hoped. I've got photos, video, witness statements, financial records. Arnold's been using company credit cards to pay for hotel rooms. Sandra's been charging romantic dinners to your joint account. And get this, she's been texting her girlfriends about her exit strategy for months. Exit strategy? She's been planning to leave you all along. The affair with Arnold was just step one. She was going to clean out your joint accounts, claim abuse, and walk away with half of everything you own. Was being the operative phrase. Exactly, because now we have evidence of her premeditation. This wasn't a crime of passion or a marriage gone wrong. This was a calculated plan to defraud you. Time to spring the trap. Where do you want to do this? Somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses, and somewhere Sandra will feel safe enough to be honest about her intentions. I have an idea. The River's Edge Hotel had a private dining room that could be rented for small gatherings. It was elegant, discreet, and equipped with excellent acoustics, perfect for recording conversations. I booked it for Saturday evening under the pretense of a reconciliation dinner with Sandra and Arnold. The invitation was carefully worded. I think it's time we all sat down and discussed this situation like adults. No lawyers, no threats, no games. Just an honest conversation about how to move forward. Sandra was suspicious, but her lawyer convinced her it was a good opportunity to demonstrate her willingness to resolve things amicably. Arnold didn't want to come at all, but Sandra insisted. She needed him there to back up her version of events. What neither of them knew was that I'd invited other guests. Madison arrived first, along with her father and 2 other Morrison Industries board members. They were there for a business dinner in the hotel's main restaurant, but Madison had promised to check in on my reconciliation meeting if things got heated. Elliot was positioned in the hotel bar with his camera and recording equipment. He'd also arranged for a friend from the newspaper to be nearby, just in case the evening produced anything newsworthy. Sandra and Arnold arrived together, which was their first mistake. They were supposed to be ending their affair, working on their respective marriages, trying to rebuild trust. Instead, they walked in looking like a couple. "Alex," Sandra said carefully, "thank you for organizing this. I think it's exactly what we need." "I hope so. Please sit down." The private dining room was intimate, designed for parties of 6 or 8. With just the 3 of us, it felt almost claustrophobic. Perfect for the kind of honest conversation I had in mind. "Before we start," I said, "I want to establish some ground rules. No recording devices, no lawyers, no outside interference, just the 3 of us, talking honestly about the situation." Sandra and Arnold exchanged glances. They'd obviously planned their approach, rehearsed their talking points. "That sounds reasonable," Sandra said. "Arnold and I have discussed this extensively, and we both want to find a way to move forward that works for everyone." "Excellent. So let's start with honesty. Sandra, how long have you been planning to leave me?" "I haven't been planning. Please, we agreed on honesty. Elliot found your text messages with your girlfriends, the ones where you discussed your exit strategy and your plans to take Alex for everything he's worth." Sandra's composure wavered. "Those were just... I was venting. I was upset." "For 6 months? You've been venting about your exit strategy for 6 months?" Arnold cleared his throat. "Look, man, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Sandra and I, we made a mistake. We got carried away, but it didn't mean anything." "Really?" "Because the hotel receipts suggest otherwise. 12 different hotels over the past 6 months. Always charged to your company credit card. That's a lot of meaningless mistakes." "How did you get access to your financial records? It's amazing what a good private investigator can discover when someone's been careless with their paper trail." Sandra was looking around the room now, realizing that this wasn't the reconciliation dinner she'd expected. "What do you want, Alex?" "I want the truth. I want you to admit that this marriage has been a sham for months. I want you to acknowledge that you've been systematically planning to destroy me financially and emotionally, and I want you to drop the abuse allegations." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because they're true. You have been abusive. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. The way you've been stalking me, recording me, harassing Arnold. Documenting your adultery isn't harassment, Sandra. It's evidence gathering." "For what?" "For this." I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. "Everything you've said in this room tonight has been recorded. Your admission that you've been planning an exit strategy, your acknowledgement of the affair, Arnold's confirmation of the hotel meetings. All of it." "That's illegal." "No, it's not. You consented to this conversation. You agreed to honesty and openness. I'm just making sure we have an accurate record of what was said." Arnold started to stand up. "I'm not staying for this." "Sit down, Arnold. We're not finished." Something in my voice made him freeze. For the first time since this whole thing started, I let my anger show. Not the calculated, controlled responses I'd been giving Sandra, but genuine fury. "You want to know what abuse looks like?" I continued. "Abuse is systematically destroying someone's self-esteem over the course of years. Abuse is making someone feel worthless, inadequate, forgettable. Abuse is cheating on your spouse and then mocking them for not being man enough to stop you." Sandra was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, anger at being outmaneuvered. "You've ruined everything," she said. "My job, my reputation, my family relationships. Was it worth it? Was destroying my life worth salvaging your wounded pride?" "I didn't destroy your life, Sandra. I just stopped letting you destroy mine." That's when Madison knocked on the door. "Alex, is everything all right in there?" We could hear raised voices from the restaurant. "Come in," I called. Madison entered, followed by her father and the 2 board members. They took in the scene. Sandra crying, Arnold looking panicked, me sitting calmly at the head of the table. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Madison said, "but we were concerned." "Actually, your timing is perfect. Sandra and Arnold were just explaining their relationship to me. Perhaps you'd like to hear their explanation as well." "That's not necessary," Arnold said quickly. "Oh, but I think it is. After all, you've been telling people at Murphy's bar about your affair for months. Surely you don't mind discussing it with a more sophisticated audience." Mr. Reeve, Madison's father, looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should leave you to your private discussion." "It's not private anymore," I said. "Sandra's made sure of that by involving lawyers, filing false accusations, trying to destroy my reputation. I think it's time everyone knew the truth about what's been happening." I played back Sandra's recorded admission about her exit strategy, her plans to take me for everything I was worth. Then Arnold's confirmation of their hotel meetings, their systematic deception. By the time the recordings finished, Sandra had stopped crying. She was staring at me with something approaching hatred. "You bastard," she whispered. "Probably, but I'm a bastard with evidence, witnesses, and a very good lawyer, which puts me in a much better position than you." Mr. Reeve cleared his throat. "I think we should go. This is clearly a private matter." "Actually," I said, "there's one more thing you should know. Arnold works for Morrison Industries, doesn't he? In sales?" "He does." "Then you might be interested to know that he's been using company credit cards to finance his extramarital activities. 12 hotels, dozens of restaurant charges, even a weekend trip to Boston. All charged to Morrison Industries." Arnold went pale. "That's not... I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like I'm sure Mr. Reeve will want to hear that explanation first thing Monday morning." As the Morrison Industries group left, I could see Arnold's career imploding in real time. Company credit card fraud was a fireable offense, possibly even criminal. His affair with Sandra had just cost him everything. Sandra sat in stunned silence for several minutes after they left. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you drop the abuse allegations. You file for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. We divide our assets fairly, and we both move on with our lives." "And if I don't?" "Then I release everything. The recordings, the photos, the financial records, the text messages, your mother, your sister, your boss, your coworkers. Everyone gets to hear exactly what you think of them and how you've been manipulating them. You're destroying me." "No, Sandra. I'm just refusing to let you destroy me anymore." She left that night, and I never saw her again in person. Her lawyer called Monday morning to discuss terms for an uncontested divorce. The abuse allegations were quietly dropped. Arnold was fired from Morrison Industries that same day. The underdog had won. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Sandra had moved back in with her mother, her reputation in shambles, her social circle reduced to a handful of loyal friends who either didn't know the full story or didn't care. Arnold was working at a car dealership across town, his marriage to Serena over, his standing in the community permanently damaged. I could have been satisfied with that outcome. The quiet victory, the private vindication, the simple knowledge that I'd outplayed them both. But Sandra had made one final mistake. She'd started telling people that I was the real villain in our story. According to her new narrative, I was a controlling, manipulative husband who'd driven her into Arnold's arms through years of emotional neglect. She claimed I'd recorded her illegally, stalked her, and systematically destroyed her life out of spite. She was the victim, the innocent wife who'd made one small mistake and paid an enormous price. It was a compelling story. And in a city where gossip traveled fast and people loved to take sides, it was gaining traction. That's when I decided it was time for one final, public demonstration of the truth. The annual Riverside Charity Festival was the biggest social event of the summer. Everyone would be there. Families, business leaders, politicians, socialites. It was the perfect venue for what I had in mind. I'd been planning this moment for weeks. Not just the logistics, but the psychology of it. Sandra needed to understand, once and for all, that her actions had consequences. That she couldn't manipulate and betray people without eventually facing the truth in public. The festival was held in Riverside Park, with booths, games, live music, and a charity auction. I arrived early and set up a booth for Foster Engineering Consulting. My new business, launched with the money I'd saved from my marriage to Sandra. The booth was strategically positioned near the main stage where the charity auction would take place. Perfect visibility, maximum foot traffic. Sandra arrived around noon with Isabella and a small group of supporters. They were making a point of being seen together, demonstrating that Sandra still had friends, still had family backing her up despite the divorce. She saw my booth immediately. I watched her face go through the familiar sequence of emotions, surprise, anger, calculation. She was trying to figure out my angle, what I was planning. She didn't have to wait long. At 2 o'clock, the charity auction began. Local businesses had donated goods and services to raise money for the city's homeless shelter. It was a worthy cause, and the bidding was spirited. That's when I made my move. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, approaching the auctioneer's microphone, "I'd like to make a special donation to today's auction." The crowd turned to look at me. Sandra, standing near the back with her mother, went rigid. "I have here a collection of designer handbags, jewelry, and clothing," I continued, gesturing to several boxes I'd prepared. "These items belonged to my ex-wife, Sandra Foster. She left them behind when she moved out, and I think they'd be perfect for today's charity auction." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the usual type of auction donation. "The items are all authentic," I continued. "Designer labels, expensive pieces. Sandra always had excellent taste in material possessions. She believed that image was everything, that the right clothes and accessories could make up for character deficiencies." Sandra started pushing through the crowd toward the stage. "Stop this," she called out. "Those are my personal belongings. Actually, they're abandoned property. You left them in my house when you moved out 3 months ago. I tried to return them, but your lawyer said you didn't want any contact with me. This is harassment. This is charity. I'm donating your abandoned possessions to help homeless people. I think that's exactly what you would have wanted, given your well-known compassion for those less fortunate." The crowd was eating this up. Small city drama played out in public with just enough edge to be entertaining without being truly vicious. "Let's start the bidding," I said to the auctioneer. "How about this beautiful Prada handbag? Sandra paid $800 for it. She told me it was an investment in her professional image." The bidding started at $50. Within minutes, it had reached $200. Sandra was screaming now, but her voice was lost in the crowd noise. Isabella was trying to calm her down, but Sandra was beyond reason. She was watching her expensive possessions being sold off for charity, her carefully curated image being dismantled in public. "And here's a lovely bracelet," I continued, holding up a piece of jewelry Arnold had given her for her birthday. "A gift from a special friend. I'm sure whoever buys it will treasure it more than Sandra did." That's when Arnold appeared. He'd been hiding in the crowd, probably hoping to avoid being recognized, but Sandra's public breakdown had drawn him out. "You need to stop this," he said, approaching the stage. "Arnold, perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Arnold Myers, Sandra's former lover and business partner. Arnold, would you like to tell everyone about the bracelet you gave my wife, about the romantic dinners, the hotel rooms, the weekend getaways?" Arnold looked around at the crowd, realizing that hundreds of people were staring at him, waiting for his response. It wasn't what, Arnold? It wasn't an affair? It wasn't a 6-month relationship conducted behind your wife's back and mine? It wasn't a systematic plan to destroy 2 marriages? Arnold turned and fled, actually fled, pushing through the crowd like a man running from a fire. The crowd burst into applause. Sandra, meanwhile, had collapsed into a chair someone had brought for her. She was crying again, but these weren't tears of anger or frustration. These were tears of complete defeat. "The final item in today's special auction," I announced, "is this beautiful red dress. Sandra wore it to the Morrison Industries Gala, where she planned to show off her perfect marriage and her social connections. Instead, it became the dress she was wearing when her affair became public knowledge. The dress sold for $300 to Madison Reeve, who bid on it with a smile that could have cut glass. By the time the auction ended, I'd raised over $2,000 for charity using Sandra's abandoned possessions. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, phones were out recording everything, and Sandra's public humiliation was complete. As people began to disperse, Sandra approached me one final time. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked. "Actually, yes, I am." "Was it worth it? Destroying my life, ruining my reputation, turning me into a public joke?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd shared my bed for 3 years, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd systematically torn down my self-esteem while planning to abandon me. "You know what, Sandra? You're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You should be asking whether it was worth it for you. Was Arnold worth destroying your marriage? Was the thrill of cheating worth losing your reputation? Was the plan to take me for everything I was worth ending up with nothing?" She stared at me, finally understanding that this had never been about my wounded pride or my desire for revenge. This had been about consequences, about actions and reactions, about the simple fact that people who treat others badly eventually face the results of their choices. "Your trip's been canceled, Sandra, and so is your little power game." I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the park, surrounded by the remnants of her carefully constructed life. The underdog had bitten back, and the bite had been fatal.